What's up, everybody? Live on Facebook and Instagram, Jonhson here, also known as Rattletrap 1776 to a lot of people out there. And I got a few other names by some people out there. But no matter what they call me, talk good about me, talk bad about me, guess what? They're still talking about whom? Right? But if they only knew that the whole thing was about one, humanity, with God as the broad shell and intricate shell. It's always about our Maker and the mission, right? So, God, country, family, right? That's what it's all about. So, always keep this handy. Friendly reminder, this is the operation 45-47, 45, 46, and 47. 45 through 47. That's what the dash means. A lot of people still struggling with that. If you struggle with that, you're definitely going to struggle with laws and orders. Let me get back to my notes over here. We're going to stay on topic. So there's definitely a blueprint. Now, I know that we're in that season of giving right now, and we're in supposed to be a season of, right now, we're talking about December, in the United States of America especially. It's always a fun time of year, that feeling that you're supposed to have deep down, and you know, your family, your friends, just the spirit of the lights and all the other things, etc. Supposed to be in that. So we're going to try to keep that as a theme today, but also apply the same thing to, that's what you're supposed to feel with your land, right? The gift that our fathers, our founding fathers gave us. And so many people are struggling and so confused because you don't know anything about that. You can't support something if you don't know anything about it. And you can't truly defend something without that support. So that's why in the Constitution, the Constitution first and foremost, when we talk about the Constitution, so many people want to use the word Constitution just because that's the only word it's a term. You don't know anything about the Constitution. It's important, but it's important for us to keep representatives in check. So it goes back to, again, the Revolutionary War, which brought us everything. 4 men, sorry ladies, but 4 men wrote all of our founding documents. So, if you would apply that and make that applicable to yourself, then it would really enlighten you to know that, hey, if 4 hold all of the literature in our founding documents, well, yeah, you can know what's going on. And you may be someone who contributes to something on a world level with maybe something that's a quote, or maybe you have a little short story. Maybe you write a book. Maybe you have a unique brain that can think a lot of different ways. Then you write something and it becomes a part of a fabric or a grain of something. But 4 men wrote everything we have. 4. But that was back during a time period when it was our main motto. So it'd be like your battle cry. The main battle cry of the Revolutionary War was taxation without representation. Taxation without representation. Now we have representatives, and we have people who don't know anything about the literature of how our 3 branches of government functions and operates. So why are you yelling, screaming, mad, bitter, angry, upset, frustrated, stressed? You shouldn't be any of those, first off. And then take all those and cast them aside. You definitely shouldn't be arguing about something you don't even know about. So in reality, not what we have, but in reality, the only people that could be talking at the table right now are people like me, some lawyers, some scholars, if you will. There's not many, though. When you separate all of your people who have no idea what's going on, then you separate all those who have an agenda, ulterior motives, surface talkers, the people who truly care about humanity, who can think strategically and critically without being swayed either way with any kind of compromise, which could be money, power, authority, fame, etc. There's very few that can walk that fine line, that can think for everybody in a broad manner via laws and orders, but also what can work intricately for everybody. There's very few of us who can do that. So, therefore, if you really want to know what's going on, you've got to do what? Probably seek to know that we are a what? Nation of what? Laws and orders. All right. So, I'm going to read Article 1, Section 7 of the United States Constitution. Imagine that. Article 1, Legislative Branch. Clause 1. All bills for raising revenue shall originate in the House of Representatives, but the Senate may propose or concur with amendments on other bills. Clause 2. The role of the President. Every bill which shall have passed the House of Representatives and the Senate shall, before it become a law, be presented to the President of the United States. If he approve, he shall sign it. But if he not, he shall return it with his objections to that House, either or, in which it shall have originated, who shall enter the objections at large on their journal and proceed to reconsider it. Remember that Elvis song, Reconsider Baby? President Trump loves him some Elvis. Reconsider it. If after such reconsideration 2/3 of that House shall agree to pass the bill, it shall be sent together with the objections to the other House, by which it shall likewise be reconsidered, baby. And if approved by 2/3 of that House, it shall become a law. But in all such cases, the votes of both houses shall be determined by yeas and nays, and the names of the persons voting for and against the bill shall be entered on the journal of each house respectively. If any bill shall not be returned by the President within 10 days, Sundays excepted, after it shall have been presented to him, the same shall be a law, in like manner as if he had signed it, unless the Congress by their adjournment prevent its return, in which case it shall not be a law. Then they'll tell you about the process. Clause 3, process. Every order, resolution, or vote to which the concurrence of the Senate and House of Representatives may be necessary, except on a question of adjournment, shall be presented to the President of the United States, and before the same shall take effect, shall be approved by him, or being disapproved by him, shall be repassed by 2/3 of the Senate and House of Representatives, according to the rules and limitations prescribed in the case of a bill. This is where people struggle, because people don't even know this process. And people don't even realize what all has been passed through the years, good and bad. But as Abraham Lincoln once said, a bad law should be strictly enforced. And listen to what Abraham Lincoln said again. Go to Google, look it up. Quote, written in history. Abraham Lincoln said that a bad law should be strictly enforced. Therefore, the people can do what? Dissent of that bad law, which means express your, hey, I don't like this law. We don't like this law. Who passed this law? We don't want this law. Do you know what we the people actually means? You've heard me say it, but do you ever apply that? We the people. We the people are the what? The government. You want to know why I'm correct all the time? It's not because I'm correct because I'm correct. I'm correct because I'm following a blueprint. I'm following a blueprint that doesn't have any compromise with it. I'm following a blueprint that works for everyone, no matter what you believe, no matter what your personal beliefs are. So many people out there, you're still caught and you're stuck in the past. This man was sent to rid you of that by ridding everything that has been constrained by a global alliance of what we call the cabal, the swamp. They would use laws and orders as a crutch. They'd just say, hey, the law says that, but the people never went and looked and read and studied and comprehended and applied. Well, no, it doesn't. You're just saying that. The law actually says this, this, and this, and you did this, this, and this. You wonder why you're in disarray? It's because you don't know what the law. Not a single person, not one single person, has taken one single word from one single sentence, from one single paragraph, from one single law. You hear the terminology there? One single word, one single sentence, one single paragraph, one single law, and shown how I am incorrect with what made these #1 bestsellers. No one. You know why you can't do it and why they can't do it? Because the law does not work that way. Now, you don't have to like the law, which, there you go. That's your civil power. That's your civil authority, rights, etc. You don't have to like the law. But you can't dislike or like anything that you don't know anything about. So it's like I tell people all the time, my job's not to persuade you to love President Trump. That's not what I do. I show you what the man is working with that outlines the 45-47, that outlines our foundation, that outlines our military establishment first, that outlines our military laws first, that outlines our military everything first, Declaration of Independence, the Federalist Papers, the Constitution, etc. But once you get done reading all those, studying all those, and comprehending all those, then you're going to love this man. Because he put his name and face on this. President Donald John Trump is not the author of all these things. He didn't come up with all these executive orders. He didn't come up with all these national emergencies. He didn't come up with all these proclamations, executive actions, etc. He just said, I will take the ridicule, the mockery, and all the chaos. I'll take that. I'll be the face of it. Now, he's also brilliant. Yep. He's smart. He's witty. He's intelligent. He's all those things. Absolutely. But he is not the author of everything that you're witnessing. And he knows that. And he's okay with that. He'd be okay with anyone saying that. It takes a team. It takes a lot of brain power. That's why he's always saying we have to protect our IQ. Well, I can go ahead and tell you right now, he's talking about people like me. Now, people like me, meaning there's multiple people like me. If you want to be in that sector, then you probably ought to start what? Looking like it. Because a lot of people out there ain't looking like it. And a lot of Republicans right now, liberals are supposed to look the way they look. They're supposed to look that way. Because they have been brainwashed so much. They have been manipulated and gaslit, and they fell for it. Republicans claim that you're not gaslit, you're not manipulated, You're not compromised. You're not these things. But from someone like my standpoint that knows all of what's currently invoked right now, that outlines, more than clearly outlines, this is a military operation, a military government, continuity operations, etc. You look just as atrocious. A lot of Republicans look just as atrocious as liberals. Because you don't know the simplicities of how the nation functions and operates. More is not always better. Less is a lot better sometimes. It depends on what we're talking about. There's cases in history when we've had less and you had to pass something extra to put an emphasis on it, but then at a certain point that emphasis became what? Overused, overreached, abused, misconstrued, and all those things. Then you need to do what? Repeal it, abolish it, bring it back to the lesser. Which we're in a case of more right now. More is not better. More is not great. So you bring it back. You cut here, you abolish here, you terminate here, you bring it back down to simplicity. Get back to what makes our nation great, what makes our people great, what makes us function and operate without constraints. So if you don't like President Trump, one, you're still making it about him, but let's just play devil's advocate for a moment. If you don't like him, well, you're the reason why you have him. And people like me, without doing any kind of forbidden sign language on here, you can cry harder. Because we love it, and we love him, and you're the reason why you have him if you don't like it or if you don't love it. Therefore, you should do what? If you're one of them, if you're in that world of, I don't like President, if you're that person, then you should want to know the laws and orders even more so. Because these laws and orders that have been on the books for all these years that President Trump's using, if they were unlawful, guess where they shouldn't be? In law. Why are they on the law books if they're unlawful? Not a single law. Not one single law that President Trump is working with the military, not one single law was passed under him. Every law he's using, way back yonder, as the old saying in the South, way back yonder. So any one influencer, anyone blue check, red check, whoever it is, news, quote unquote, Fox, OAN, Newsmax, whoever, if they don't know the current laws right now invoked, and they're not talking about them, you don't need to listen to them. You need to unfollow. You have the power to do so. We are in a social media world. You like the page, you subscribe to their pages. Therefore, when you like it, subscribe to it, you're going to be the what? You're the recipient of what they give you. You allow your feelings and emotions to get distraught. You allow that. Same thing when someone calls you a name. You allow that. You allow it to affect you. People call me an a-hole all the time, and I'm like, well, I mean, again, I'm just showing you what's currently invoked in the laws right now. It's like I do sometimes with my friends, when I'm sitting around a campfire and I say, all someone has to do is this, acknowledge what this says. Just acknowledge it. You don't have to like it. That's not what I'm doing. I'm not saying, hey, do you like this? Do you love this? No. Just acknowledge that it says this. Then you get to decide if you like it or love it. But everything right now that we are using, been in the law books for years with heavy emphasis on plurality there. Change the S for a moment, make it slang and put a Z in place of the S. Years. Which is also what brings us to the point of Marbury versus Madison. I've said this before, but I'm going to say it again and try to get you to really think about it. James Madison. James Madison, the main author, drafter, however you want to look at it, the person who solely authored, wrote, drafted the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. See, a lot of people don't realize that way back then, there were a group called the Federalists, because they wanted more federal power. And then you had anti-Federalists, because they wanted more state power. The anti-Federalists in that era presented, there was 12 original, but they only adopted 10 as the Bill of Rights. There were 12 original Bill of Rights. They were presented to the Federalists as a second constitution, meaning that, hey, consider this with what you wrote and consider this being something that could be redrafted, meaning hey, integrate them and then rewrite it and then have this in here, or consider ours over yours, or there was a lot of ors there. So Madison took it, read it, studied it, and said, well, these are more individual rights. It's not a government, a body of our branches of government. So he called them the amendments. But guess who wrote them? He rewrote what they had written. You see where we're going here? So it'd be like a ghostwriter, right? Where you take it and you go, okay, well, I'm going to rewrite it, though, using my brain, and I'm going to write this in the correct chronological order and also in the correct terminology. That way it's not what? Misconstrued, overused, misused, butchered, twisted, etc. He wrote it. And they became known as the First Amendments, the Bill of Rights. A lot of people don't know that. So you have James Madison, the main author of the Constitution and the main author of the Bill of Rights, who wrote half, whether he solo wrote them and or co-authored, half of the Federalist Papers. The Federalist Papers, ladies and gentlemen, were papers from James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, and John Jay, which were promotion papers of the Constitution. So when James Madison wrote the Constitution, then these three men, including him, so two other men, and the main author, wrote these Federalist Papers. They were promotion papers of the Constitution to give to the people as to why they should adopt the Constitution as our governing form of representatives. Tacking on and keeping in mind the war just shortly before was mainly fought for what? Taxation without what? Representation. Representation is the key, one of your key focal terms here. So now watch. Let's do some math here. You've heard me say it before, but I don't think people are applying this, how important this is. James Madison goes into the Supreme Court in 1803 to have to clarify what a law looked like. What is a law? Can we do some math here? 1803 minus to 1787? That's 16 years. Think what happens. If you're over 40, you know how quick 16 years goes by. Just like that. But in reality, we could also use the 14-year marker because the Constitution wasn't enacted. It wasn't put into action until 1789, March the 4th, which is why our original inauguration date in history was March the 4th. So 14 years. after the enabling, put into action of the Constitution. Of the founding father who wrote the whole Constitution and the Bill of Rights is having to go into the Supreme Court and clarify what is a law. Do you not hear what we're saying here? Do you not know what the Constitution outlines? Article 1, legislative branch. Legislation. Who writes the laws? Who passes the laws? The legislative branch. Executive branch. Article 2. That's your president. Duh. Article 3. Judicial branch. The founding father whose brain wrote these processes is having to go into one of those processes, and explain to the processee how the process goes. 16 years after he wrote the process. You wonder why we look stupid right now? You wonder why Americans look atrocious, dumb, ignorant, lazy, complacent, and stupid? Because the founding father who wrote the whole Constitution, wrote the whole Declaration, is having to go into the damn Supreme Court and clarify what a law looked like 16 years after he wrote the whole process. I'm telling you, do not vote for Derek Jonhson. If you ever see me anywhere, that means somebody has started the process to put me in. If you ever see me on a ballot and I ever make it to president, I will deport you quicker than a cat can lick its rear end. If you cannot name the three branches of government, how they work, function, and operate, I will deport you over that. The heck with birthright citizenship and all this. I will deport you simply because you cannot name the three branches of government, how they operate, how they function. I'm going to start a bumper sticker that says, do not vote for Derek Jonhson. Now, you think liberals are calling President Trump a king and a dictator? I would put a stamp of approval on my name. You'd be gone. Long gone. You'd be a long gone, Daddy. I don't need you anyhow. Be an old country song. You'd be gone. Out of here. The Electoral College. The Electoral College was established by our founders to prevent such a thing from happening. You hear liberals in the past 30, 40, 50 years, they want to abolish the Electoral College, which is part of our foundation, part of that brilliant mindset, those brilliant men back then, and men who followed. They made it to where massive pools of population didn't drown out everybody else. Strength isn't always in numbers sometimes. It can be if everybody's on a blueprint that works. But when you have a pool of morons who don't have a clue what's going on, if strength were always in numbers, then guess what we would have no recording of Moses. You'd have a recording of all those 40 people who all individually knew how to get out of that wilderness. You wouldn't have a Moses. See, it's Moses. None of these people have names. If strength were always in numbers, then we'd have names, and then Moses was a bad leader. That's what they'd be saying. Well, we didn't really know. He was an old guy, and we didn't really know. He may have been senile, and he may have led us to a hill with all these little cups of Kool-Aid and told us to drink it. That sounds like something that happened in history one time too. So see, that's why every person needs to have a strong foundation in the laws and orders. Now, you may not want to be a representative. You may just want to have a strong foundation in the laws and orders, but elect someone like me or whomever else out there to be your representative, if they want to be your representative. But they're going to do what? They're going to reflect you and what you want, what we want, the people want. That's how that works. But you may not want to be that representative. So that's also how this works. So like the Electoral College, what's awesome about this time around is that just 25 whatever years ago it was, when you had the Bush and the Al Gore debacle, if everybody remembers that, what happened in Florida, South Florida, all right, the Chads and all those things. If everybody remember that debacle, then way back then, Hillary and that crew were doing what? They were trying to do what? Oh, we need to abolish the Electoral College. Yeah, when it doesn't go in their favor, they do what? They cry wolf. They want to change the way the game is played, right? Forget about the principles of the game. Forget about the principles of the X's and O's. Forget about the laws and orders. When it don't go their way, they wanted to do what? Change things. It's not how it works. All right? So, the Electoral College is a perfect example. This time around, what's great about it is they made quote-unquote Joe for the average folks out there who don't know anything what's going on right now, until we can get everybody to a place psychologically where we can present to you. See, once everything's done, once everything is cleaned out and it's functioning and operating and thriving and people can see the results of the fruits of all the people behind the scenes everywhere doing what we're supposed to be doing, to say, hey, quit arguing, quit fussing, no chaos is needed, just separate all that. That was gaslighting on both sides, manipulation on both sides. You just quit all this. Here's what you need, and here's what works for everybody. Chill out. Look, I got your best interest, and whatever it is that there's certain things that's not going to be in federal government. There's certain things that's not going to be in state government. You'll get over that. All right? But once you get over those little things, you'll see that everything else is going to work for the greater good of humanity. All right? So that's what you're witnessing. So what's great about it is they made quote-unquote Joe say that the electoral process works accordingly. That's for record's sake in another manner. Now, I know for a fact, and you just saw it, you just witnessed President Trump, you just witnessed him post something just this past week. Very, 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 very important. Very, 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 very key. One of the key validations outside of this right here, that one post was one of the key validations up next to this. So before we get to that, again, 2017 to 2021 was a resetting of the legislative branch. Everything you witnessed from 2017 to January the 20th, 2021 was a resetting of the legislative branch. That's why all these unique orders were invoked. The laws were already on the paper. They were already there. All President Trump had to do was go, well, this law's on paper, this law's on paper, this law, I can use this, we can use this, we can use that, we can use... Then you invoke certain orders, which we're about to break down in a minute. But you got to know, 2017 to 2021 was the resetting of the legislative branch. And there's validation of that in something else that just came out this week. Straight up validation. You can't get any more validated and any more correct, if you want to use the term correct. 2021 to 2025, that was the resetting of the executive branch. That's why on January the 20th, 2021, retired veteran, that's what I'm really, really, really known for, was when the video I had that went globally viral, August 24, 2022. I broke down all the laws and the orders and the regulations and the customs of the United States Army, because we're the ones who fire the cannons on Inauguration Day. Those were not cannons for inauguration for quote-unquote Joe. It was a funeral service for the monarchy, but also quote-unquote Joe. All right? It's just straight up. You cannot argue with Army regulations. You can't argue with military regulations. You cannot argue with Department of Defense, Department of War now, regulations. Cannot argue it. They're straight up customs, and they've been there for many, 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 many years. There's also a publication by FEMA and the Department of Homeland Security of reconstitution of the executive branch. A reconstitution means you take something from its state it's sitting in right now and you put it back into its original state. You can't get any more validated than that. Those were already up under your Federal Continuity Directive 1 and Federal Continuity Directive 2, which also together, those are federal. You also have military. You have a joint planning and a joint operation manual, 3.0 and 5.0, that accompany FCD1 and the other accompanies FCD2. You got to know these things. All right. Now, what you're witnessing right now as we speak, from January the 20th, 2025 to present day, you're witnessing the resetting of the judicial branch. That's why every day and every week you see something with a judge. A judge did this, a judge did that, a judge blocked this, a judge blocked that. A judge has been fired here, a judge has been reprimanded. President Trump terminated 8 judges last week. Where's mainstream media? They're under a wartime order. So they're putting out certain things. They're also trying to strengthen you, whomever you are out there. They're trying to strengthen you and your critical and strategic thinking, but also your critical and strategic what? Research. So how do you not know? How does most people? No one's chattering about it. I've posted about it. Hey, here's 8 relieved, removed, fired. You got to know the presidential powers, the presidential authority, but you really need to know in a wartime situation when President Trump or a president is a wartime president. See, so many people through the years have been tricked, deceived, gaslit, and manipulated to think that a president who's involved with any kind of war is a wartime president. That's not what the definition of a true wartime president is supposed to be. We were never supposed to go to these nations and fight these wars whatsoever with that terminology. The wartime situation in the Title 50 application, Title 50 of our codification, Title 50 is war and national defense. Does that say international or national? National defense, national security. International has its own separate entities. This is also why we have the Law of War Manual. That's why we have a few other things out there. We have the Hague Conventions, Geneva Conventions, the Lieber Code of 1863, the Nuremberg trials. We have things that are international for a reason. War and national defense. So that's why you need to know the 3 branches of government. The legislative branch, Article 1, we vote them into office. That's your representatives. That's your House of Representatives and that's your senators. We vote them into office. Article 2, your executive branch. That's your president and vice president. We vote them into office. Article 3, your judicial branch. The president nominates the judge. The Senate confirms the judge. Let's do that again really quick. Article 2, executive branch nominates Article 3, the judge, the judicial branch. Article 1, the Senate confirms Article 3, the judicial. Therefore, when we the people are the government, and we vote in who we want as representatives, and we vote in who we want as our president, when that judicial branch goes against any of the laws that are being passed and the orders that are being invoked, they are to be impeached. Because they're not doing the will of the people. It's not about what they want, what they see, and how they see it. It's about what we want, because we, the people, equals the what? The government. We're the true government. The problem is that majority of the people don't even know the simplicities of government. And so many people base all their selfish desires, perversions, and all kinds of other things that we've witnessed in history. All this gay shit, all right, all this trans shit, all right, all that stuff, perversion. Now, if you want to be gay in your household, go ahead. Go for it, boo-boo. You got it. That's your right. It's your house, your property. But when you step out in public, what we the people want, desire, straight up. Now, I still believe that no one should hurt anybody, should harm anybody whatsoever. All right, and there's a proper way to do things. But it's no different than PDA. I don't want to see some people making out in public. Married, straight, heterosexual, doesn't matter. There's a time and a place for everything. Everything has a time and a place and a purpose. Act like adults. Act like humans. Have consideration for others. We also need to work on all these little girls walking around looking like hoes. All right? Parents, letting your children let it all hang out. We got to re-instill some discipline in this nation. Some discipline, some structure, some principles. All right? You wonder why your friends and whoever, whatever they are getting catcalled? Because they look like a dang whore. You want some respect out there? All these people talking about you don't get any respect. Respect is earned. You know why you're not earning respect? Because you don't command respect. That's how that works. I didn't come here to preach today, but I can definitely get on it. I mean, look how desynthesized our social media has become. Get on Instagram for a moment. Look at all the hoes on there. Look like it. Walk like it. Act like it. Then guess what you're going to be thought of? Exactly what you're looking like, walking like, acting like. So there's a way to have your freedoms. Absolutely. There's a way for that. But it has to be reciprocated. It has to be reciprocal for everybody. Think of others first. Don't think about yourself first. This is how we make things reciprocal. Think about others first. That's why the military is so strong and important as an example. Because majority of the military, before some of it got woke, yes, but majority of it hasn't been woke. There's been bad apples all in the military. Absolutely. That's being cleaned out. That is for certain being cleaned out. But as a whole, the military thinks of everybody else first. You brag on your brother and your sister first. You brag on what they've done first. Then they'll brag on you. They will. And if they never do, then it still ain't about you anyway. Don't worry about that. We're here for God's purpose and God's plan first and foremost. That's all you're here for. And so many people have gotten to a selfish mindset. It's all about yourself. You don't think of others first. You don't know what the term respect means by true definition. Respect, love, all those words are actions. They're not just words. They're actions. And they're reciprocal. They're reciprocal type words. Reciprocal type terms. Meaning they're an action and they have to do what? You have to give it in order to what? Receive it. So many people don't know that. So the judicial branch, they started taking power and authority out of your hands. Because so many people don't even know the simplicities of government. And how to live and let live. But also have a broad laws and orders. The Constitution, first off, is our framework to keep them in check. When that goes awry, meaning when it's not looking like it's supposed to look, then we bounce back to what? Put the Constitution aside, let's take a step back. What came before it? Declaration of Independence. What does it say? But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, and then it says becomes what? Destructive of these ends, meaning these foundations, these actions, these commands, these authorities, these powers, whatever word you want to put there, meaning our foundation, which is laws and orders. The processes of the laws and orders. when it becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to throw off such government. You know what throw off means by true definition, Webster, Oxford Languages, etc.? To get rid of. Well, we don't have to get rid of it completely. We get rid of those what? Abusive powers. Those abusive positions. And then we just reset that back on its foundation. We don't have to go back to what? The next step before that. If the people don't want to abide by the Declaration of Independence and what we the people want, which what happened in this last election, popular vote and electoral landslide by we the people, which means what? We hold that authority. We hold that power. We have that. And when we, that electoral and that popular, say we want all these things changed, they better be changed. If they don't, and there's a group of people who want to uprise out there, if they don't want to adhere to that change on the fundamentals and the foundation, then guess what you do? You bounce back to what came before the Declaration of Independence. What was that? An old-fashioned ass whooping is what that was. All right, so that's why we tell you, when you draw a line in the sand, be ready to stand on that side of the line and fight for what you think you're fighting for, because you might just be the recipient of something you don't want. And I can tell you right now, President Trump ain't even tapped into the active duty hardly in this nation. Just a few Marine Corps in California. The rest have been reserve components and National Guard. You know what ain't been activated yet? Cowboys, good old boys, country boys, the Vietnam veteran hippies that are still alive who got spit on when they came home. You want to talk about some old-fashioned ass whoopings you could take? Those people right there, those Vietnam vets, turn them loose. Turn them loose. Say, all right, boys. All right, it's your turn, baby. You see that long-haired purple freak over there with that ring hanging out? All you got to do is yank on it a little bit, and they'll go crying, running home. They don't want no more of what you got. Those, the bikers. I know a lot of bikers. The bikers ain't been turned loose yet either. All those entities haven't been turned loose. And I can assure you right now, any libtard that does hear this message, you don't want none of this. You don't want none of this. We're the most ammo-filled country in the world. You don't want to be the recipient of what we got. And we won't even have to fire a shot. It's what's funny about it. We will tie you up like we do when we're cowboying. Not only will we tie you up, some are going to be calm about it. There's going to be people like me, we're going to tie you up, hog tie you, arms to your back, legs to your arms. You're going to be stomach on the ground. And I'm going to put my dirty, wet, stanky sock in your mouth and say something now. Say something now. Tell me more about what you don't know about our foundation. Tell me more. Go ahead, say it. But we don't have to get back to that if people will do what? Read, study, comprehend with a grateful heart. What we have is a bunch of ungrateful Americans. Spoiled, ungrateful, unappreciative Americans of the freedoms that you have. You want to treat America like Burger King. You want it all your way. You can't think for everybody else. You only think for yourself in your little walls, in your little compound, probably in a basement if you're a libtard. But Republicans, you're looking at an atrocious second because you don't know what this man's working with. The man you claim you love and support, and you don't know anything about the laws and the orders. So the judicial branch took over this nation. Lawyers and judges. All because people quit doing what? Reading, studying, comprehending. You don't have to be a lawyer to know the law. We have deemed that you have to be a lawyer to what? Practice the law. But you don't have to be a lawyer to know the law. And again, who puts these people in power? Who established this system? Who established these systems, these processes? Who established that? We do. We put them in those positions. We tell them, hey, yep, we want you to be this because you want to be this. But when they do what? When they abuse it, but when a long train of abuses and usurpations, hear that? That's always applicable to every position, law enforcement as well. Law enforcement, Congress, judges, lawyers. Those always walk around. It should be like a little halo around them. They should always have that over their head circling like this. To not do what? Abuse their authority and their powers given to them by whom? The government. We, the people. So therefore, if you don't know what you're supposed to know, how can you keep them in check? How can you keep them in their lane? You can't. That's why it looks this way. And if you're a libtard listening, if one of your family members tagged you on this and you made it this far, if you're a libtard, the reason why you have this, man, is because you don't know that either. The big bad wolf had to show up, and the big bad top-down operation had to show up because you, the actual government, don't have a freaking clue what your civil authority, civil power, civil rights, and civil responsibilities are. And to prove this, even more so, January the 18th, 2021, just 2 days before the world thought they saw, quote-unquote, Joe inaugurated, you didn't. You witnessed a funeral service by Army regulations and Army customs. President Trump issued Executive Order 13977, which is a federal protection of judges, law enforcement, and prosecutors, which is what you're witnessing right now. You're seeing what judges are and what aren't. Standing up to what? The law. By what? Integrity of the law. What does the law read? Don't worry if it's good or bad right now. Why is it still in law? Why was this law passed if I can't use the law? If you were the president, you say, well, if it's against the law, then why is it in the laws? Why did you leave it here? So the principle is not, is it a good law or bad law? The principle is, if you're yelling it's against the law for me to use this law that's in the law, surprised I didn't trip over my tongue there saying that, then why is it in the law? Acknowledge that. If you have any integrity out there as an individual, you'll forget about good, bad for a moment, and you'll go, why is it in the law? And you'll go back and look at the origin of when it was put into law. And then if you're a libtard especially, you don't need to be sitting there saying, oh, that's against the law and President Trump's doing this, that. No. Nope. When did it originate? And why was it left there? If it was unlawful, then why did your people put it in law? And if it wasn't your people, it was still the swamp. So why did the swamp put this in law if it's unlawful? Address that first. Stop worrying if it's good or if it's bad. Address by integrity. That's where your integrity comes in. You'll find out if you have integrity is if you go, oh, dang, that originated in 1947. Woo, it's been on the law book since then. And then look at what all has transpired from the origination date to present day. If you have any integrity, it won't be good or bad. You'll go, Then that should get your little hamster up here kicking on its treadmill and going, what all took place between there? Then it will lead to hopefully someone like me, but especially me, because I'm the only one with the #1 best-selling books that outline the whole blueprint of what's taking place, which is a strategic and special operation via invoked laws and orders, current laws and orders. Current meaning they're still in effect right now, not current being that they were written and passed right now. No, current meaning they are in effect right now. And there's a blueprint. And the blueprint is the 45-47. The whole thing's in operation. That's why you're to put brackets around it. Just like that. Which brings me to the awesome point. President Trump, just this past week, put out a post. It's the most biggest post of validity since this became a visual. This he put on here April the 2nd, 2023, which was a midway point between 2021 and 2025. If you knew what was going on, this was your validation. 45 through 47, 45 to 47, 45, 46, and 47. The dash is what that means. If I said that I'm coming to, Shreveport, Louisiana on December the 10th to December the 15th, why would I put and type out December 10, 11, 12, 13, 14? Why not just put December 10th dash 15? That's what it's always meant. Always. Every bit of that dash with a sequence like that has always meant it, especially with numbers. Always. Now what's cool about it is 45 plus 46 plus 47 equals 138. The number 138. In simple gematria, my name, Derek Jonhson, spelled out, Derek Jonhson, equals 138. You know what Donald Trump equals? 138. Can't make this stuff up. So President Trump posted this week that every single executive action, executive document, executive order, everything, every quote-unquote legal document by quote-unquote Joe has been canceled. Null and void. And then it said what? No legal effect. E-F-F-E-C-T. Effect. Not affect. Effect. With the A. Effect. You know what no legal effect means by definition? Well, let's just read it really quick. No legal effect means something is legally invalid, like a document or agreement that is null or void. Treated as if it never existed. Oh, what sweet validation it is. Because in the world of executive orders, my friends, and national emergencies and proclamations, in the world of those, a president can issue an executive order, right? A new president, 10 years, a year, 50 years, doesn't matter. If it's not revoked, but even if it is revoked, let's just go with the revoked. If it's revoked, it's still what? On paper. And a president in a year, 10 years, 50 years go, well, you know what? I actually think that this executive order way back here is actually a good policy, or is a good this, or a good that, and I'm going to revise that order. That's what a revocation means. It just means that the next president may not like it and they revoke it. There's a difference in the word revocation and cancellation. There's no such thing as a cancellation in legal terms. It's either revoked or an order can be rescinded, but typically rescinded comes on the military side, meaning like, all right, I rescind this order. Because if you rescind it, you could drop it back to something lesser and then just go to a lesser and then, no legal effect, which means all those from 21 to 25 didn't mean a thing. Well, I wonder why they didn't mean a thing. Oh, because 45-47 means what? This was a what? strategic special operation. And the laws and orders invoked as we speak, every military law that the military is working under right now, every Title 10 and Title 32, guess when 95% of them were invoked? 2017 to 2021. Not what you've seen as President Trump's first year of 47. They were all invoked back here. So how did they make it through this dash if the world thought that quote-unquote Joe was real? How did they make it through? Military orders are not continuation orders. They have time signatures on them, meaning like they have 60 to 90 days. And you've just witnessed that, which is all validation, but it's double, triple, quadruple, quintuple. I mean, we're way out there, whatever number. So you just put validation all over it. So how did those orders make it through the dash if President Trump's a dictator, a king, a threat, a Nazi, all the things they assail? How did those orders make it through that dash if President Trump is what libtards think of him? This was unconventional and irregular warfare. Irregular and unconventional. And President Trump just validated unconventional diplomacy in his new national security strategy that just was released this week. So what you witnessed and what you are witnessing, because the laws still show we're in a partial continuity government, partial, which means we're on the latter part of it. All right. What you're witnessing is a strategic special operation. President Trump quotes straight out of the Law War Manual. Those are not federal government anything. And until he stops quoting from straight up Law War Manual, then we're still in a military occupation, military operation, military government, continuity operations. And guess what? When a president is operating in martial law, he don't have to tell you that. Martial law could already be declared. He don't have to tell you that. That is on a .gov site as well. He don't have to tell you anything. Depends on who we're fighting. What's the enemy look like? Why would you broadcast to the enemy what we're going to do? What did President Trump tell you on the 2016 campaign trail? Never again will we voice to the public what goes on with our military, because if you find out, guess who else finds out? See, what I'm doing is not a forecast. All these, everything I've done for you, and every day, every podcast, and every post, it's not a forecast. Everything that I do is already what's taking place. I don't forecast. I don't make predictions. Everything that I've shown you has already been validated. Every aspect of it. Now, we, military, special operations, special operators, secret military, etc., can tell you kind of a broad synopsis of what it might look like in the future, because this is what's in votes right now and this is where it's headed. That's still not a prediction. Anyone who's giving you some form of a prediction, or, you know, this is going to happen here, or it ain't happened yet. And you don't want that. Because if that were the case, then that would also mean the president or the Congress and or both could always do that. It would never promote working. If the president went in and just slashed the gas prices like that, well, then people would always do what? Expect that all the time. Versus having what? Our oil industry, all the men and women out there off the coast doing what they do day in and day out. You would terminate them, because you would expect everything just to operate and function without a process of how those people get paid, how they drill for the oil, how they process the oil, how they ship the oil. You wouldn't want that. You would demand, oh, well, if the president can change it that quick, why can't he do it all the time? See, you just terminate everybody else. You wouldn't want that process. That ain't how it works. So it's the same thing right now. People say, why would it look like this? And, well, why are you guys playing game theory? And why are you guys... Well, we we have what? We have functioning cities. We have sidewalks. We have city lights. We have massive corporations. You can't just rip the rug out. Even if you don't like that and you would like to go back to the 1800s style living, you still can't just rip the rug out. You'd have to do what? A collective group of people go, okay, we don't like big cities anymore. We don't like big lights and big infrastructure and all this. We want it to be smaller, small town. Okay, but you can't just rip the rug out. You'd have to slowly do that. Slowly do certain things to bring it back. Bring it back. Home it in. Bring it home. You can't just rip the rug out. Because when you rip the rug out, you're going to do what? You're going to create pandemonium and chaos with other people. So see, you just can't rip the rug out. And so many people want to rip the rug out on everything. So that's what you're witnessing. The whole thing's an operation. Now, you don't have to like it, but you'll get over it. Because there's nothing you can do to stop it, and you shouldn't want to. It's for your own good. But when people say, how can you know so much stuff, dear Jonhson? How can you know? How are you the one? Why are you the one? And blah. Well, I read what you don't. I study what you don't. And I comprehend what you don't. Can you? Yep, you most certainly can. Do you? Most of you don't. All right, and that's just a simple fact. So you can read what I read, you can study what I study, and you can comprehend all of it. But you got to have what? Initiative. And you got to also do what? You got to shut down all these other things. All these other people, these blue check, red checks, all these people that do nothing but stir you up, blow smoke up your dress daily with drama and propaganda. That's not how you know what's going on. And too many of you are still stuck in that. And that's stuck in the past. That's what the past did. That's what the swamp did. I thought you were tired of that. I thought that's why you yelled, drain that swamp. I thought that's why you love President Trump. If you love President Trump and you yell, drain that swamp, and you're still listening to people who do nothing but stir you up when there's most definitely a blueprint in place, you ain't doing what you're supposed to be doing. And keep in mind, again, I signed my publicity contract, not a publishing contract. Huge difference. Publicity. Publicity was a publicist who put me on radio and TV to promote my work, promote me, promote my name and my work. That's what a publicity contract is, not a publishing. I solo wrote this. I solo published this. No publishers. I am my own publisher. All right? I signed my publicity contract to write these books, which this one came first. It's part 1, this part 2. I signed my publicity contract February the 18th, 2023, at Trump International, at President Trump's reserve table in his chair. No one's ever been allowed to sit in his chair but me. With the man president, with the boss president. February the 18th, 2023. I forget if 2023 was a leap year or not. It seems like it was, but even if it wasn't, it doesn't matter. We're just talking about one day. But let's just use that it wasn't. February the 18th, 28 days in February. That's 10 days. Say March. March has 31 days. Can we do some math here? 31 plus 10 is what? 41, right? And then you have what? April 1st, April 2nd. So that's what, 43 days? 43 days later, signing that publicity contract, President Trump puts this on his ball cap. And you think that the trolls and the haters, they ain't even ankle biters. They can't even reach the sole of my shoe. They're up under it. You know that old saying, some days you're the windshield, some days you're the bug? Well, they're the roach. They get squashed daily. You can't debunk something. You can't debunk it when it's all part of what you're witnessing. It's just not. The laws and orders don't work that way. Which is why the War Powers Resolution Act, all of a sudden, just this past week, for the first time you've seen on mainstream media, Guess what all the quote-unquote legislators are talking about? The War Powers Resolution Act. Now, Lieutenant Colonel Bosey is someone who forwarded this book, Lieutenant Colonel Special Operations Australia. Highly recommend reading his work as well. He forwarded this book. Lieutenant Colonel Bosey told you 2 months ago on a podcast that I do. He said special operators are 3 to 5 to 6 weeks ahead of everybody, depending on what it is. We're 3 to 5 to 6 months ahead of everybody, depending on what it is. And then we're 3 to 5 to 6 years ahead of everybody, depending on what it is. Depending on where we are in operation, what it is, and what. They're just now talking about the War Powers Resolution Act to mainstream media. But what are they saying? They're saying, oh, President Trump can't do this, he can't do that, Venezuela this, yeah, he can. So let's just look at a few things that's taking place. Yemen. So we were bombing Yemen even before President Trump got back into the people that thinks this is all real time. All right, we were bombing Yemen. All right. And then Iran, everybody witnessed that we took out Iran's nuclear facilities. Iran. And now Venezuela is a hot topic. But look at Yemen. Okay, so if you were going by principle again, what I was talking about earlier, principle and integrity. If you're going by principle and integrity, erase your emotions, divorce your feelings and emotions, forget about what your thoughts are on bombing and the military and all. Forget that. This is how people start to get along, work together. This is how you do it. This is how it's supposed to look. Don't always work this way, but this is how it's supposed to look. Forget about all of that. And go, why weren't you blowing up social media about the military force in Yemen like you are with the military force in Venezuela? Why weren't you talking about the people of Yemen, the civilians of Yemen, like you're talking about criminals? Because there's been no civilian mention with Venezuela. We're talking about drug boats. We're not talking about the country of Venezuela and on land. We're talking about drug boats of Venezuela. So why weren't you just as aggravated, mad, bitter, all these other things, hateful, ignorant? Why weren't you the same, by principle and integrity, the same level of hatred towards President Trump with Yemen as you are with Venezuela? If you cannot answer that, and if you cannot match your hatred of Venezuela with Yemen, you're a hypocrite. Not only are you a hypocrite, but you're also stupid and you're a moron. If you don't want to be called stupid or a moron, then you probably want to do what? Level up on your what? Principle and your integrity. Because the same military in Venezuela, even though it's a different branch and different units and different MOS and different kind of mission, doesn't matter. It's still military. It's still U.S. military. Which would have had a what? A command. And I can assure you right now that Joseph Robinette Biden Jr., all the black kids want to touch my golden hairy legs in the pool. That dude was not real, one. Wasn't president, two. The laws and the orders show this. Unique laws and orders that outline a strategic and special operation via military, irregular warfare, and unconventional warfare. But while we're on principles and integrity, let's go ahead and burst all those libtard bubbles out there and all the rhino bandwagon, quote-unquote Republicans, quote-unquote President Trump supporters. Let's go ahead and burst that little bubble for you. Yemen, Iran, Venezuela, you know when those executive orders and national emergencies were issued? Yemen and Venezuela would be Barack Hussein Obama. Iran would be Jimmy freaking Carter. 1979. This executive order 12170 with a national emergency is older than most of the people who are mad, pissed, and upset and claim that they hate President Trump and claim he's a dictator and a king. So what did the swamp, the cabal, the Congresses, why were they renewing this executive order of national emergency yearly? Why were they continuing it year by year? Why didn't they have a plan for Iran's nuclear weapons? Why didn't they have a plan? Why did the uranium enrichment get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger? Why did they show you that quote-unquote Obama, yo mama? Why did he say that the enrichment was down? This is all still on government archived website. But in fact, all the other agencies around the world said, nope, it was way up here. 80-something%. Quote unquote, Obama, yo mama, Osama, yo mama, Obama said it was like 4% or something ridiculous way down here low. Not even in the ballpark. So see, most of the people calling President Trump a dictator, a king, and a Nazi, and all these other things, saying that they're the same ones saying that all this stuff is unlawful, they don't even realize, one, they don't know, first, listen to that, they don't know how the law and orders work. So there's the no. But then they don't realize that majority of these quote-unquote unlawful orders, they're not unlawful orders. They're under laws passed by their people and the rhino Republicans of days of old. So this is why it goes back to today. Today is the anniversary of Pearl Harbor. Tomorrow, December the 8th, will be the day that Franklin Delano Roosevelt spoke to Congress. All right? And you have the War Powers Act of 1941. Then you had a War Powers Act 1942. Now, it sounds like two separate acts. 1942 was a land and naval usage only. 1941 was the Powers Act. And that was where Roosevelt told the Congress, if you don't act and declare a war, then guess who the military will listen to? Commander-in-Chief, not you, the Congress. So this is why this is very important. I have done a timeline before of 41 to 2016. 1941, War Powers Act. 1947, National Security Act. 1949, NATO. 1950, you have your 1950, let's see, what was I going to say? 1950, well, Korea started. All right, it ended 53. We're just going to skip a number there for a reason. 55, Vietnam started. A lot of people don't know Vietnam actually started in 55. That's when, would have been smaller. All right. And then you had 1961, which would have been January the 17th, 1961. You had President Eisenhower, who was a five-star general, rare, five-star general, gave his military-industrial complex speech and medical. He didn't like where any of them were going because of what? Money. Soldiers started coming in the military just for money. Oh yeah, I'll raise my right hand. Yeah, I do solemnly swear to support and defend, blah, 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 blah. You got to say all that. To get in, you got to say all that. You see where we're going here? That's why you can't just go with what people say where we are now. Of course they're going to say that. Of course they're going to say they're not guilty. Of course they're going to say it's against the law. Of course they're going to... They don't even know what any of it says. Of course they're going to raise their right hand and repeat the oath, because that's the only way they can get in on the other side. 1961. 1963, JFK, January, went around the Federal Reserve straight to the Treasury. Guess who didn't like it? People back here. What happened 11 months later? 1968, we left the gold standard. Unified Budget Act was passed. 1971, you had a little thing called the Nixon Shock. That's when Congress created inflation. Inflation and deflation. That's when they made the dollar as valuable as they wanted it to be. Inflation. Or devaluable. Deflation. That's when they started playing with your money, your taxes. Then they did it again in 1991, another unified budget. You got to know all these things. So many Americans don't even know the simplicities of the financial portions of the federal, military, and its separate, etc., but all of how they can join. Because you put too much trust into people who manipulated you and gaslit you and won't look you in the eye and tell you this is how it works, this is what it is, and you're actually the government. You're actually supposed to tell, if I was a representative and me talking to you, it would say this. You're supposed to tell me what to do. You're supposed to know this. But you don't. So therefore, I did what? I took it in my hands. That's what it would be like if a cabal member or a swamp member was actually telling the truth. That's what it would sound like. Which you should take that very offensive in another manner, because it's basically also still telling you that you're dumb, lazy, ignorant, stupid. And if you don't want to be called those things, then you have what? The authority and the power and the initiative to do what? Reverse that. You don't want to be called that, then you got to do what? You got to do what you're supposed to do, and then know what you're supposed to know, and then you won't be that. Which is why right now, as we speak, the mainstream media has been talking about the War Powers Resolution Act of 1973. So I skipped 2 dates on purpose in that timeline. 51 and 73. You've heard me talk about it. 51 is when the Congress, back then, put term limits on the president, but not what? Themselves. Nowhere in the United States Constitution does it tell to do such a thing, period. Article 2, Section 1, Clause 1 of the United States Constitution just says a president serves 4 years in a term. James Madison and Alexander Hamilton, 2 of the 3 authors of the Federalist Papers, and then your main author of the Constitution, your main author of the what? Bill of Rights, which includes your First Amendment. What did they say? They felt like a president should serve what? A lifetime like a king. Ooh. Might want to go back and look up some quotes in the foundational history there, Podness. Now, what libtards have done, and quote-unquote historians who have what? An agenda and ulterior motives and certain intent to mislead you, what did they do? They have written that, well, George Washington stepped down after 2 terms and he set the precedent. George Washington was the first president. Just because he was the first don't mean that was the precedent. You got to go back and look at whom. Who wrote the Constitution? Who wrote the Bill of Rights? Who are the authors, the drafters? Who created this process? The original Constitution, the Constitution, says nothing about Congress putting term limits anywhere on president or themselves. Nowhere. We decide that. And also what they've done with this operation ties into that. When you hear President Trump say all he had to do, this was an operation, government in exile, puppet government, strategic operation, special operation, that. But for the people who don't know that yet, what they visually did was they gave you a president who did everything he said he was going to do, and you got it, and you witnessed it, and you loved it, the people who were paying attention. Even if you didn't know the laws and orders yet, you still saw the fruits of that. Then they gave you the absolute most atrocious you've ever had with gas, food, taxes, inflation, etc. On purpose. Where you would what? You'd feel the pain. You'd see the pain and feel the pain. But you had already seen what? You'd already seen the taste of heaven. So when you hear President Trump say all he had to do is leave it there, proves everything. When something's good and working, what's that old saying? If it ain't broke, don't what? Don't try to fix it. Well, why are people trying to fix something that's not broken? That's what Congress did all those years with their quote-unquote checks and balances that they started. All because what? People forgot what you're supposed to know, so they created their own little checks and balance. They let a president get in. First 2 years, they unraveled what the last president did. And guess what happened? The people who loved what that president did, they're whining and complaining. But these people over here, they went over there and appeased them with certain things. Got them all stirred up. Got them all riled up. Got them up here. Oh, yeah, this is great, great, great. Then they put another president in that did what? Tore that down. These people over here cheering. Oh, yeah, finally. Right? That ain't how America works. We're all in this together. Right? And you can most certainly be gay at your household. You can be Buddhist at your household. You don't have to follow the principles of the United States of America and what it was founded on. Thomas Paine is a great example of that. I had people, when I talked about Thomas Paine on some of my posts before, you had the Christians writing to me. Why are you writing about Thomas Paine? He was an atheist. You're missing the point. Oh, holier than thou, you're missing the point. Thomas Paine was an atheist, but he believed that America should have a foundation in a deity. Now think about that. Think about what kind of man Thomas Paine had to be an individual who believed in what he believed, but thought as a broad principle and a broad standard and a broad, whatever you want to call it, government should have a deity. So, so many people don't know how to think like that. So you can be whatever you want to be in your own household, sure. And you can still walk around in public and be that too. Just be that, though. You don't have to walk around with a banner that says, hey, I'm flamer. I'm a flamer. Oh, look at me. I'm flamer. You don't have to do that. But it's kind of like I was telling a friend the other day. If you want to walk around with nose rings hanging out, you look like a doggone banty rooster that's all painted up and tatted up, look like a freak show walking around, you're probably going to get some stares. Isn't that what you wanted? Isn't that why you got it? Isn't that why you have stuff written on you? You tatted it on you. Am I not supposed to read you like a Dead Sea Scroll rolling by? I mean, why'd you put words on yourself if someone ain't supposed to look and read it? Why are you worried about people looking at you like, if you look like the Dead Sea Scroll and doggone documents walking around, I don't know, you might know something I don't. Your tattoo may say, hey, the bridge is out up ahead. Don't drive this road. So if you look like a freak show, be prepared to what? Be looked at like a freak show. That's what you wanted. That's why you look like a freaking banty rooster running around. Just be yourself, boo-boo. That's what you wanted. Then be yourself. But you don't have to put that on people. And if someone looks at you too crazy, then if they call you a name or say, then guess what? One, you asked for it, but two, you don't have to be the recipient of it. Just keep walking. That's what being yourself is. You asked for it, you wanted it, so own it. But there's a way to have this broad standard, and that's what our founders established. But what's funny about all this is right now, they're just now, talking about the War Powers Resolution Act. Just now. And I've been talking about this for almost 4 years now, publicly, on podcasts, etc. It's all in the books. Everything's been validated. They're just now. Which means they're doing what? They're setting up, because this is the biggie. This is going to set up the big disclosure down here. So you've heard Tim Kaine say, oh, he was going to try to block the U.S. military without the congressional authority. There's already congressional authority. What have you heard me say, OGs? All the OGs here know what I'm about to say. If they know, when I say this line right here, hey, you know what I'm about to say, they know what I'm about to say. Title 50, Chapter 33, Section 1550. Now, in 1973, that Congress, who had already just 22 years before, tried to put term limits on the president, but not themselves. 22 years later, they took the War Powers Act of 41 and they amended it. Over a what? A presidential veto. Nixon vetoed it. So what did Article 1, Section 7 say earlier that I read? That if the president disapproves, well, it kicks back to what? The House of Origin. And with a 2/3 vote, they can override the president and make it law. That's what happened in 73. When you, the people, were all in your hippie phases, in your hippie days, and you were protesting Vietnam, and okay, not here to argue that. Whatever you want to do, think about. But when you were in your hippie days, a lot of you out there that are frustrated and mad and, think there's pandemonium and you don't know who to listen to, a lot of you are from that generation. It's because you didn't know what you were supposed to know. You allowed this to happen. Now, it's not a guilt trip, but you still allowed this to happen because we the people, you the people of that generation and that era, you didn't know what you were supposed to know. And you didn't rise up all in one voice. This is why everybody needs to know what's going on, where everybody can rise up together. And that's where your strength in numbers is applicable. When the strength in numbers knows what they're supposed to know, then the strength in numbers can apply and be effectful. You can't do that. You cannot do that if you don't know what you're supposed to know. So the Congress amended the War Powers Act in 73, and this is where they actually, basically it bit them in the butt, if you want to be slang and funny, but not too slang. It bit them in the you-know-what. So the very thing that they established in law is the very thing that President Trump and the generals, the admirals in this operation is doing against them. Well, you established this in law. This is why national emergencies are important. In 73, that Congress made it to where a president had to declare a national emergency and then give a notice to Congress in 48 hours of the use of military. Then the president had a 60-day clause and an additional 30-day clause, but a 90-day clause. That he could only use the military for the 90 days, and after the 90 days, guess who had to do what? Congress had to get involved for a declaration. Well, you've witnessed this. So when you hear people out there, this is all validity. You cannot argue this. It's not arguable. It's not arguable. December the 20th, 2019. A Democratic House and a Republican Senate, so bipartisan, under President Donald John Trump, put in the War Powers Act, Title 50, Chapter 33. Chapter 33 is your War Powers Act of your war and national defense of Title 50. Title 50, the overall codification, Title 50 is war and national defense. Chapter 33 of Title 50 is the War Powers Resolution of 1973. Section 1550 was placed in there December the 20th, 2019. In the bottom, it has a codification. It says it's temporary, which means it's not for future presidents. Temporary, meaning what? Strategic. It also has a double meaning there. If it's not for future presidents, meaning it's temporary, then it wasn't effective for quote-unquote Joe. Because President Trump just validated that with his post that all of what happened from 21 to 25, January 2025, is null and void. no legal effect. Which is also why in the very bottom of Section 1550, there's an executive document there. That executive document is quote-unquote Joe relinquishing all command, military command, meaning Commander-in-Chief and presidential, to the Secretary of Defense, who is now the Secretary of War. That's what the clause reads in the executive document in the bottom of Section 1550. It says, I delegate the authority and functions vested in the President of 1550 to the Secretary of Defense. That was July 19, 2021, which would have been 5.5 months into what people thought was, quote-unquote, Joe's first 6 months. So he was relinquishing all authority and power as a Commander-in-Chief to the Secretary of Defense. You know what 1550 is? That's from the National Defense Authorization Act of 2020. Who was president again in 2019? It says, I hereby delegate the authority and functions vested in the president of 1550. Who is the president of 1550? President Donald John Trump. The Secretary of Defense is directly under the president in that situation. The most recent to date, December the 7th, 2025, the most recent to date order of succession within the Department of Defense, now Department of War, is coming up on its 5-year anniversary in 3 days. December the 10th, 2020. Executive Order 13963. That's the most recent order of succession. That's why you see me posting about the importance of order of successions. Very important. Quote-unquote Joe does not have one single order of succession within the Department of Defense or national security. How could he meet with the Joint Chief of Staffs if he didn't have any single order of succession within the National Security Council? Can't. No authority. Because it wasn't real. And it's a World War II tactic. It's an unconventional warfare tactic. Government in exile and puppet government. It's a World II history repeat. We've already used this before. It's not new just because you've never heard of it. So that is your authority. So when they say that President Trump has no authority, yeah, he does. That's wide open. The Venezuelan operation just now got its name. It was just now named the Operation Southern Spear. It started April the 1st, 2020. Southern Command, it's the same Southern Command. Go to Southern Command's website, April the 1st, 2020. But you got another clause of 1550. That clause of 1550 specifically says, not later than 180 days after December the 2019, and every 180 days thereafter. The President is to report to the Congress, the House and the Senate, defense committees, the use of military force, regular and irregular. Irregular, there's your covert, clandestine, special operations, to the Congress. In that first 180 days, Executive Order 13912 was signed March 27, 2020. It invoked Title 10, Section 12302. 1 million reserve components to active duty. April the 1st, the launching of the Enhanced Counter-Narcotics Operation in the Western Hemisphere, with 22 joint partners, Colombia being one of those. Recent article said the Colombian president is offering his dissent on what's taking place. This is all distraction. This is all strategic operations. It's bait and switch. Bait people who fall for it and switch it a day or 2 or 3 week later, 2 week, month later, it doesn't matter. It's bait you up, get you baited, get you engaged, switch it. Gotcha. If you're tired of that and you want to know what's going on, then stop being the what? Stop being the prey. It's real simple. Because it's not for you. if you don't want to be that. It's not for you. It's for those who haven't seen me yet or found this book. That's what it's for. Bait and switch. April the 1st, 2020, the enhanced counter-narcotics operation in the Western Hemisphere began. It says this on the website. It began then. The transnational, all the things going on with all the transnational that President Trump is naming terrorist groups. Executive Order 13773. You'll find that on the Department of Justice. I mean, you cannot outline this any more clear. April the 30th, 2020. Same 180 days of that clause 1550. April the 30th, Executive Order 13919. Invoke Title 10, Section 12304. Selective reserves. But the 12304 requires a 2-year advancement of funding. Well, there you go. That's why the operation's just now getting a name to it. So when you hear people say it's unlawful, then all you got to do is know what you're supposed to know. Here's what you do to them. You go, hey, why don't you go check out Supreme Court Docket 23-939, filed March 19th, 2024. In that docket, it specifically asked the question, can a president order SEAL Team 6 to commit a political assassination on arrival? And it tells you amici curiae, which are friends of the court, who are combat generals, say an astounding what? No. And it tells you in the bottom that any military officer who gave such an order or carried out such an order committed the gravest of crimes, murder. Well, the last time a president and SEAL Team 6 were involved with a assassination, Osama Yo Mama Obama. May the 2nd, 2011. Bin Laden was not in Afghanistan. On top of it, guess where he was? In Pakistan. May, June, July, August, September, October. 6 months later, Muammar Gaddafi was quote-unquote assassinated. October the 20th, 2011. In September 2009, September the 11th, what a date that is. September the 11th, 2009, Gaddafi stood in front of the United Nations General Assembly and he gave a fiery speech about how are we not going to investigate what happened to the hanging of Saddam Hussein? He was the United States government's friend until they turned on him. He was Dick Cheney's friend until they turned on him. He specifically mentioned Dick Cheney, who just passed away recently, quote unquote. Who had, not by regulations, had a wrinkled flag and then it was covered on top of it. You never covered the American flag. The flag draped casket is already a symbol, if it's ironed, of honor and dignity and service. Not a wrinkled one. Wrinkle means you're a traitor. And then when you cover the flag on top of it, it's not regulations. That's not military regulations whatsoever. But this has happened with George Herbert Walker Bush, wrinkled flag. They've all had wrinkled flags. Gaddafi stood at the UN General Assembly in 2009, September the 11th, 2009, which would be at that point 2 years before his quote-unquote assassination, which would be 6 months after the world thought they celebrated Osama bin Laden being killed because he had been pinned and labeled the author and creator of the 9/11. Now, this Supreme Court docket, 23-939, tells you straight up that it was murder. Who was the leader of Libya? Gaddafi? What took place in Libya in 2012? September the 11th? Benghazi? And what did some old hag, and that's pretty light terms for the witch, what did old hag do under oath? What does it matter anyway? They're gone! So that's how the old hag felt about the embassy, huh? That's how the old hag felt about our ambassador, huh? Who was Obama's Secretary of State? That old hag. Who was Obama's Vice President? Whose name is not in the War Powers Resolution Act, libtards? Shall we play a game? Fill in the blank. Whose name is not in the War Powers Resolution Act? Obama. You still want to talk about what is unlawful? I don't think you do. Hashtag deport liberals. All right, Ukraine. Let's break down Ukraine really quick. Ukraine, real simple. In 2004, the United States Department of Defense was funding the biolabs in Ukraine. This is all documented, all right, which would be long before President Trump. So see, this is why all this has a divider. The divider came, you could argue June the 16th, 2015 when President Trump rolled down the escalator, but you can really say November the 8th, 2016, line in the sand. That's when he won the 2016 election. All right, everything from November the 8th, 2016, moving forward, completely separated. Hence the visual. That's why this is a visual. That's why you have a middle ground in between. This right here is a middle from 44 back and then 48 forward. This is why this is an operation. Because it's the resetting from here moving forward. All right, you got to keep in mind, from 2008 to 2012, Putin, that libtards just can't get out of their mouth, all right, amongst other things they can't keep out of their mouth. But Ukraine, Putin was not the president of Russia from 2008 to 2012. He was the prime minister, but he wasn't the president. Recently, you've seen President Trump, if you're on True Social, which a lot of people did not get on True Social. You claim to be a President Trump supporter, but you didn't join True Social, which is what he told you to do, because that is his platform. That is him posting over there. You didn't do that, so you're already not listening to the president. But he has told you with posts, he has warned the former. He says, I'm warning the former president of Russia, you're not the president anymore. He was the key president 2008, 2012. Then you got to know what happened from 2008 to 2012 with those entities. And that's why you can't just assume that what's taking place right now is only right now. You can't. This is a clean out of the swamp. Yemen, Iran, those are prime examples. In Venezuela, those are people who didn't capitulate. So you also got to know what was going on with Ukraine. You got to know a little history of Russia, the Soviet Union, and Ukraine. You got to know their history. Most of you don't know that. So therefore you can't do what? You don't need to be whining, complaining, griping, and fussing. Now, do you need to know everything? No. You just need to know the key things. You don't have to know everything and be a scholar on every intricate detail of it, but you need to know the key things, and I can help you with the key things. The Ukrainian breakdown, as I call it. All right? So 2008 to 2012, what happened in 2010? 2010 was the uranium scandal. President Trump has called the Ukrainian scandal one of the greatest scandals out there, the uranium scandal. Well, what was the hag, I call the hag, that's Hillary Rodham Clinton, the hag, what was the hag doing? Sorry, Merle Haggard, I know that is a good name on the other side, but what was the hag doing standing with Putin, smiling and grinning? 2010, the selling of what? Uranium 1. $145 million deal to the Clinton Foundation. Now you got to fast forward a little bit and get back to 2014. They have one of two rounds for the presidency in Ukraine. Poroshenko won. Obama called to congratulate just a few days later. All right. All these things took place in 2014 alone. Listen, in 2014 alone, Obama had 4 executive orders, 3 in the month of March alone, for Ukraine, in which one he declared a what? National emergency with Ukraine. Why are we declaring a national emergency with Ukraine? How come so many Americans didn't even know about this executive order with this national emergency with Ukraine? A nation most people can't even put on a map. That happened in 2014. Joe Biden, the real Joe Biden, Vice President Biden, made 7 trips in 7 months to Ukraine on your taxpayer dollar. 7 trips in 7 months. Victoria Nuland worked for the Obama administration then. She helped secure $1 billion in the quote-unquote defense budget for Ukraine. The same Victoria Nuland who was verified on tape, even though it was a tape, not a visual, but it was a tape, verified, saying F-U-C-K, the European Union. That's the same $1 billion that Joe Biden bragged about, and it's visual, the whole world can see it, know about it. He bragged about that they were going to fire a certain prosecutor if he didn't do something. And then he said, he was asked what happened. Well, they fired the SOB, and he said it. They fired the son of a... The same $1 billion. Guess whose children were working in Ukraine during this time period? Biden, Pelosi, John Kerry, and Mitt Romney. They already have on the National Archives all the emails with Joe and Hunter and Rose Seneca and Burisma. If it's on the National Archives, then it means it's going to be archived for history's sake, which means it is most certainly real. It did take place. The liberals are still saying it wasn't anything. There's nothing on the laptop. Yeah, it's already on the National Archives, morons. And it's already in a book right here, verified by the FBI, 636 pages. FBI verification, 636 pages by this group right here, that Rudy Giuliani received a copy from the FBI and took it to Marco Polo Group, and they put this together. All right. sex trafficking, child trafficking, prostitution, money laundering, you name it. Yeah, it's been verified. And then just this year, for the people that thinks it was real, August and July this year, you had quote-unquote Hunter on an interview, and they were talking about the laptop and Rudy Giuliani. Yeah, it's most certainly real. So that's a soft disclosure, getting all their people stirred up, right? Saying, oh, no, it's not yet. Oh, yeah, it is. That's 2014. All right, so you got to know those little things. A little bit of history of that. Then you got to fast forward to 2018. So when you remember Putin smiling with the hag, Hillary brought him Clinton way back here. All right, then you got to understand what a capitulation is. A capitulation is a unconditional surrender. It's a white flag. Hey, I surrender. Whatever you need from me, I'll provide for you. So it was General Paul Vallely, all right, who set up the meeting, who I've been on podcast with, thanks to my buddy Brad, all right, but it was Paul Vallely. What a hero he is. Look him up and pay him all the tribute in the world. He set up the meeting with Putin and President Trump in Helsinki, Finland, and that's where you saw the soccer ball handed to President Trump. That is a capitulation, but it was also a multiple layered visual. I capitulate. Tell me what you want, whatever. I capitulate. So you got to know all those things first. That was a capitulation. All right. Then you got to know that we left the intermediate. It's called the Intermediate Nuclear Range Nuclear Forces Treaty. We left that. In October, it was October 2018, we made a declaration of that. And I'm going to read a little bit of it for you just because it's, yeah, I mean, you can't, you want to talk about putting a, I don't know what you want to call it, not a muzzle, but if you want to talk about a full exposure of what the swamp did, that was manipulation and gaslighting, and it read perfect on paper, but it didn't have that meaning on the background. Watch what this did. So, U.S. withdrawal and termination. The U.S. declared its intention to withdraw from the treaty October 20, 2018, citing the previous violations of the treaty by Russia. So we, President Trump, left this intermediate range nuclear forces treaty October 20, 2018. This prompted Putin to state that Russia would not launch first in a nuclear conflict, but would annihilate any adversary, essentially restating the policy of mutually assured destruction. Now let's look at mutually assured destruction. I've talked about this before, but I'm going to read it word for word. Mutually assured destruction, MAD is the acronym, is a doctrine of military strategy and national security policy which posits that a full scale of use of nuclear weapons by an attacker on a nuclear armed defender with second strike capabilities would result in the complete annihilation of both the attacker and the defender. Woo! Do you hear that? A full-scale use of nuclear weapons by an attacker, so if you're the attacker, I'm attacking you, would result in complete annihilation of both the attacker and the defender. And it says specifically, it is based on the theory of rational deterrence, which holds that the threat of using strong weapons against the enemy prevents the enemy's use of those same weapons. The strategy is a form of Nash equilibrium, in which, once armed, neither side has any incentive to initiate a conflict or to disarm. The result may be a nuclear peace What did President Trump just put in the national security strategy? That he is the president of what? Peace. That was 2018. But see, right before that, left this out on purpose. So we broke a treaty. We did, with Russia. But guess who else broke a treaty with Russia? Ukraine. And it was a Commonwealth treaty. So see, on paper, you would have thought that a treaty would have been a good thing. But when you read what leaving the treaty with Russia did, and when you read the treaty what Ukraine did with Russia, it actually creates peace, as it says here. Mutually assured destruction. Not the polar opposite. So if our agreements, which would be basically terminations of these treaties, if our agreements mean peace, then what do the others mean? So now, fast forward to 2022. See, the libtards and the rhinos and the ones who just follow propaganda and drama and all the stuff that they're told to do, same thing country music fans do. You're told to like it because you don't know anything. You're just told, here, like this person. Here, get mad. Here. You wouldn't know that the actual Ukraine-Russia war started when? What year did it start? February, what? 2014? Uh-oh, there's that year again. 2014. But they tell the people that it started in February 2022. Isn't 22 after 18, last I checked? So see, the actions afterwards are not the actions that would have been before 2018 with those treaties in place. So what you're actually seeing and witnessing is not what they're telling you out there, because they're not ready to disclose the bigger operation, the bigger visual yet. We got to get rid of a bunch of trash first that the past put on everybody. Deceived people, gaslit people, manipulated people, which was the psychological operation. Now we're running a counter-psychological, and we're reversing out all these bad things that were not good for anybody all over the world. And also we're trying to play, what? Psyche, with people going, you're getting mad for no reason. You're upset for no reason. You're upset, mad, confused because you don't even know what you're mad and upset and confused about, because you don't know anything about what you're supposed to know. 2022. Guess who did not play in the FIFA World Cup of soccer? Russia. Now, don't that soccer ball have a little bit stronger effect and meaning once you know what you've been watching is a strategic special operation? It should. And also, in the quote-unquote debate with Joe last year, why are they mentioning Article 5 of the NATO Constitution? Did you not go read Article 5 of the NATO Constitution? Why are we even quoting an article of which Ukraine is not a part of? Ukraine's not a part of NATO. See, if you'd have just gone to that little simplicity, the visual of the soccer ball is your mic drop, everything. Why would anyone be quoting from the NATO Constitution when a country is not a part of NATO, which would be like being in a country club, not paying your dues, right? Let's say you're in a country club and 5 of you out there, and you're paying your dues and you're solid, you never miss a date, but you find out I've been playing golf for free. You ain't gonna like that, are you? Hey, he didn't pay any dues. What? But it'd be like the club president and CFO and COO or whoever else taking up for me over you. When the rules say that, well, Article 5 says an attack on one member is an attack on all. Well, if someone's not a member, then why would you be defending someone that's not a member? 1, 2, 3, all of you. Also, they made old blabbermouth, old stuttering Stan. I'm just telling you, for the people that thinks he's real, he wasn't. But since you want to believe that, you're saying you believe a guy who can't even put a full sentence together, when I can show you all the laws that show you it wasn't real, and it wasn't a real president, wasn't real nothing. All been validated. What was Stuttering Stan doing talking about Belarus? Belarus is not a member of NATO either. They put this stuff so in front of you that, sorry, if you don't like being called, redistricting. You're seeing all the stuff right now on redistricting. Redistricting, ladies and gentlemen, is where the fraud was. The Congress, those people that you know nothing about, what they're supposed to be doing for us, the people, we the people, the actual government, these people changed all these maps to fit their little game theory. And then we, those that knows what's been going on all these years, have taken the board back over going, nope, this is where you put your people in. How did they know there were swing states before an election? How did they know there was a battleground state before an election? They knew because they created the fraud. They created this interference. They created this redistricting. They did this. That's why they've shifted certain maps. That was their fraud. So all those people out there yelling that it's against the law for President Trump to be doing what he's doing, you got to know the law. And you also got to know that, well, that actually wasn't lawful what they did. They redistrict certain maps in certain states for certain people to win because it was all based on maybe race. It happened in Alabama. There's a certain place in Alabama that they redistrict the map to, and it only fits the black population. Call a spade a spade. It is what it is. Who got voted in? Black person. By a landslide. Because they redistrict the map for nothing but black populations. That is fraud. Straight up. So see, all of what you've been witnessing, there's no ethics in that. There's no morals in that. There's no character in that. There's no principle in it. There's no integrity in it. They can't square up, square to square, in a balanced map and go toe-to-toe and win outright by what? Policies by what? What people, we the people want. That's how you're going to win. It's going by what districts, work areas need what? What the people want. Now, it had got topsy-turvy where the people didn't even know, obviously, so it had to be a top-down operation to clean out all these laws and clean out certain things as you're seeing to get that rebalance back. So blame that on the people. Blame it on yourself. Blame it on whomever you want to blame it on. But, it is what it is. Now, to show the people out there, but if you got friends and family who are still arguing with you, all you got to do is hit them with this. If they're yelling redistricting is against the law, then go, okay, well, if that's against the law, then stay there. Stay with that. Stay for a moment. Don't change when I tell you what I'm about to change you. I can change you, but don't change yet. Sit right here. So you're saying it's against the law. Now let me show you something. We're going to find out what kind of principle and integrity you have. This is how you do it to your friends and family. You say, all right, you stuck with that. You're saying it's against the law to redistrict. Okay. Well, let me show you something. So the battleground states, President Trump in 2020 filed via the Supreme Court, United States Supreme Court, via the state of Texas versus 7 swing states of the 2020 election that you all claim that he's lying about and he's a sore loser. And all. You said all these things. Okay? Well, he filed the Supreme Court via the state of Texas, a state he's never lived in, first off, versus 7 battleground states. In 2024, he landslid every single one of those 7 battleground states on top of the others, but he landslide those. So, why were the same 7 swing states of 2024 the same from 2020? That's never happened in history. If it's not an operation, why were those swing states the same? Winning those not only showed that he won them, which, all right, go with these people, these unlawful people, go with their theory for a moment. Say, well, you say that he lost 2020, so you're saying that your person won 2020 in those same states, that he just won in a landslide. So he flipped those 7 states. That would be on the surface. But then you hit them with, well, never in history before has the same 7 battleground swing states been the same before or after the next presidency. So not only did he landslide them, it shows what? He also won his court case. Cases. That hasn't been disclosed yet because they're not ready for that yet. But here's how you show people that you're not just dragging this on. When people say, oh, Derek Johnson's just dragging this out. No. How can I drag out what the law shows? The law shows it's still open. The law shows it's still in effect. The law still shows it's active. The law still shows it's what? Invoked. Because there's an order there. Where is that order? Title 32, which is a what? National Guard. But it's a presidential federalization call-up. Because it's election. In 2018, who was your president? Title 32 was invoked, a presidential federalization call-up to active duty. The National Guard cybersecurity teams. The National Guard cybersecurity teams have been active 2018, 2020, 2022, 2024 elections. That's federal, meaning presidential only. Military orders for every veteran, most every veteran knows this. Some don't, but they're going to learn. Military orders are not continuation orders. They're not treated like an executive order with a national emergency where you can continue it. If President Trump is a quote-unquote dictator, a king and a Nazi and a threat like the liberals and quote-unquote Joe and quote-unquote Kamala and quote-unquote Obama and all them, they assail of him, then even if they were a continuation order, which they're not, but even if they were, why would they want to continue an order that President Trump invoked that catches their fraud and catches their system and has caught and entrapped their system, their corruption? Why would they continue that? It's not a continuation order, but why would they continue it? It's not even a question because it's not a continuation order. The National Guard cybersecurity teams have been active in every election since 2018 on the same order from 2018 because there's not a new order in place. Just like there's not a new order in place. If you went to Google right now, Google and what they want you to see, if you actually stumbled on it, Google would tell you that quote-unquote Joe terminated President Trump's Proclamation 9844 from February the 5th, 2019 for the southern border, Title 10, which is presidential, military, presidential, Title 10. But there's no Title 10 or Title 32 order in place by quote-unquote Joe. So how was President Trump visually a quote-unquote former president standing at the border of Texas in February 2024? How did 14 states deploy to Texas the week before and the week after President Trump was in Texas? How did the National Guard go to Texas if the Title 10 was revoked and terminated by quote-unquote Joe. There's no Title 10 or Title 32 in place by quote-unquote Joe. And even if you found one now, let's say even if, right? So even if somehow one popped up and they were keeping it disclosed and hid or whatever, which they could do, they can do, because they can restrict certain things at certain time periods. During a wartime period, they can do that. Well, what did President Trump just do this week? All executive actions by quote-unquote Joe, the auto pen, are hereby canceled. They are no legal effect. Then go back and read the definition of no legal effect. As if they never existed. Because they didn't. Which takes you to what? The 8 executive orders with 8 national emergencies from 2017 to 2021, that resetting of the legislative branch, all these unique executive orders with national emergencies invoked by President Trump. Why would quote-unquote Joe continue the election interference, executive order, national emergency, enforcing Doge? Why would he enforce Doge? All right, in the 2021 American Family Rescue Plan Act, he funded the digital service. That is Doge. Now, it's not he, but it's for the normal people thought that. Now you have full validation proof. If you know anything about legalities, you know that what President Trump just posted, no legal effect. Then you'd also know that this right here outlines, and I outline it in my books, the strategic and special operations of military law, the military sector, unconventional warfare, irregular warfare, government in exile, puppet government, all these strategies and tactics outline this portion, and then this portion that comes together. So, enforcing Doge, the digital service that who created? Obama created the digital service. President Trump just renamed it. All right, taking back the Panama Canal. We sent 4,000 Marine Corps just down there just a few months ago to Panama Canal. Special operations have been all over the Caribbean and Central America and South America. So General Paul Vallely, again, told the whole world in April this past year on our podcast, he said, I gave President Trump 2 plans, an offensive plan and defensive. He went with my defensive plan first, built the wall. Now he's going with the offensive plan. He told you this on our podcast in April. All of us special operations, all the commanders of special operations, and then me and little old Brad, and then the general told the whole world. The general told the whole world, we have special operations in Mexico, and we're about to decimate the cartel, and all over Central, South America, Venezuela, said we're going to decimate them. We have special operations everywhere. He told you this in April. He validated it. I've been telling you before then, but you have a general, one of the most decorated generals in history, telling you in April what you're just now hearing. And I have all the photo evidence of special operators, aircraft, all over those regions. More is not always better. Sometimes it's just the few who know what's going on. Deporting the migrants, restricting telecommunications, all these executive orders that quote-unquote Joe continued for the normie, the target audience would mean compliance. If you still want to believe this babbling baboon, whatever you want to call it, name it whatever you want to call it. You want to think he's a dignified man, whatever the heck you want to say out there. I'll let you roll with it. All you want to say, then it's compliance. Because continuing an executive order with a national emergency that's doing all these things, that's being enforced, the very things they're calling him a Nazi and a king and a dictator, the very things that's being enforced, quote-unquote Joe, the Hoettes, Obama, for all you rhino Republicans that you just keep sitting on your fence, you're a bandwagon President Trumper, you're not a real President Trump supporter, you're just a bandwagon, you're just there for convenience. You thought Obama was pulling the strings behind the scenes. If Obama was pulling the strings behind the scenes, compliance. Because every single thing the military is working with right now is put into place 2017 to 2021. All your foundational military orders were there, and they made it through this little dash right here. Now, you have more validation this week. Military.com put out an article. Fort Bragg Psychological Warfare Group posts chilling video. Single quotations. We are everywhere. A secretive Fort Bragg operation that specializes in influencing people's thoughts has released a hypnotic recruitment video that is laced with hidden meanings and strange images. Oh, me, oh my. What have I already in publication? Part 1, since December 2023, which stemmed from my documents from January 2021. This is Part 2, thicker. This is all special operations, psychological warfare. Special operations. Known as the 4 Psychological Operations Airborne, or 4 PSYOP, the group specializes in, quotations, using the power of mind to persuade opinion and discourse among the nation's enemies. The 1 minute and 17-second clip, wow, that number just keeps popping up, posted November the 19th on social media, is a string of baffling clips including old cartoons, masked figures hiding in plain sight, and a group of people staring blankly at the viewer over the phrase, "We are everywhere." There is another force applied in combat that we generally don't think of as a weapon of war. That weapon is words, the video says. Words are weapons. This is psychological warfare. Then it tells you specifically. Among the surprises found, references to conspiracy theories, the Ghost Army that deceived the Nazi generals in World War II, and the popular Pepe the Frog gif shows up. At one point, the phrase, "anything we touch is a weapon," flashes and fades. But see, like I've told you out there, be careful though. There's a lot of people who are capable of reading Q, reading things and comprehending it, but it don't mean they are an ANON. It don't mean they are an operation. So you got to be careful. We still have to have the integrity of the military. Because I can tell you right now, if there was a callback, meaning a physical callback to military, guess who's going? Me, I, and 6% of America. 94% of people ain't going. And out of that 94% are a lot of these podcasters who make you think that they are somebody with some kind of intel, and they're not. They have regurgitated what people like myself, and I'm a very tiny little notch, but there's a bunch of others out there who have given you what we're supposed to be doing via our oath first, but also being called back at certain capacities. There's ways to be called back externally, all right, but still working with the military. There's a lot of ways to be involuntarily called back. There's a lot of ways. Also, with special operations, all it takes is one special operator to recognize a veteran who had the capabilities, who may not have got to further their military career in psychological operations. All it takes is one special operator to recommend that person. So you got to be careful still, because we have to keep the integrity of our services, our branches, that is, our service and our branches. We have to keep the integrity of that. We can't have people run around thinking they're also all of a sudden Rambo or something. They're not. You can't be running around thinking you're that. When you've never been in the military, you may have missed an opportunity in a calling. God love you, feel bad for you. But when you're not official capacity, you don't need to be making people think you are. Sorry, that's just not how it works. All right, the national security strategy is the last thing I'll talk about. It mentions Alexander Hamilton. Woo. It mentions the Declaration of Independence. The first thing I have read in many, 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 many years. Maybe the first thing ever that I've read in my lifetime that with our government mentions the Declaration of Independence. The new 2025 National Security Strategy mentions the Declaration of Independence. Then guess what it mentions? Validation of the dash. It says President Trump is using what? Unconventional diplomacy. Then it mentions the National Security Council. So how could quote-unquote Joe meet with the Joint Chiefs of Staff, your generals and your admirals, if quote-unquote Joe didn't have a single order of succession with the National Security Council? National Security, the National Security Act of 1947, that is what? Title what? 50. Which houses your what? Records your what? Houses, records what? Chapter 33, which is what? The War Powers Resolution Act. That Obama don't have an entry in. Then it mentions the Western Hemisphere. And it mentions the Monroe Doctrine, which is a doctrine from 1823 that talks about the what? Western Hemisphere. What is Executive Order 13919 from April the 30th, 2020? 29 days after the launching of the Venezuelan operation in the Caribbean. What does that executive order read again specifically? Before it was given a name, Operation Southern Spear, recently. Its launching when it began. What does it say? The enhanced counter-narcotics operation in the what? Western Hemisphere. And then one other thing, I'm just going to read it because it's really awesome. In the National Security Strategy, the new one. The Primacy of Nations. Page 9, it's page 13 on the PDF, page 9 on the paper if you print it out. It reads this: the world's fundamental political unit is and will remain the nation state. It is natural and just that all nations put their interests first and guard their sovereignty. The world works best when nations prioritize their interests. The United States will put our own interests first in our relations with other nations, encourage them to prioritize their own interests as well. We stand for, the word for is in italics for a reason, we stand for the sovereign rights of nations against, in italics, the sovereignty sapping incursions of the most intrusive transnational organizations, and for, in italics again, reforming those institutions so that they assist rather than hinder individual sovereignty and further American interests. The reason why that's so important is because this right here, all President Trump had to do is enforce the law. Even in a normal presidency, all presidents would have to do is enforce the law. If you don't like the law, that is where you come in. We the people, or the government, if we don't like the law, then we do what? We tell our representatives we don't like this law, abolish this law. Why was it passed when we didn't want this? But you have let you and your family and your ancestors, so there's no way to know was it really you. That's a generic you. But go ahead and feel the guilt, feel the shame. That way, when you feel the guilt and the shame, you can do what? You can find your purpose, which will also find your voice to find your initiative, to find your niche, to find your calling, to find your purpose, to do what? Apply yourself to the whole puzzle. So feel the guilt, feel the shame, and think of it as your fault. That way you'll feel that, and then you'll want to do what? Change. For what? Humanity. Not just yourself, and not just because one or two other people. No, when more people stand together with one voice, with one heartbeat, on the same everything, and we keep it there, then we don't have to worry about other things coming up here, because we can suppress whatever it is that's trying to take that away from us. It's been the polar opposite. That primacy of nations exposes that. This 45-47 exposes that. Everything that President Trump and the military, the generals, the admirals, this whole strategy and plan has done that. Is it's exposed all the swamp. When they say it's against the law and it's unlawful, these people have been in politics for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. If it's unlawful, then you put it there. Or you condoned it because it was there before you were there. See how that works? So see, that's why all this chatter and nonsense and chaos and all this drama and propaganda from blue checks and red checks is all just that. And if it sounds braggadocious, then let it be, so be it. But in all reality, me, the general, the colonels, and everybody that I'm on with are the only people you really need to be listening to, because we're the only ones that knows what the hell is going on lawfully. By this law, by military first, by our nation's foundation, origin, and standards and principles, etc., integrity, principles, discipline, structure. Anybody else that's out there trying to just stay part of the past or looks part of the past, you don't need that. You don't have to have that. There's already a blueprint in place. It's a #1 bestseller for a reason, both of them. But I'll tell you what, selling like doggone a cheap bottle of tequila in front of an Alcoholics Anonymous is this right here. Why is this book the first time in history by me? Why is this book the first time in history to put all of our founding documents in one location? And then some, Title 10, Title 50, etc., etc., etc. Why is this the first book? Why? 573 pages of nothing but text. Ain't no photos in here. So if you're a photo person, you don't want this book. This one's going to make you read, study, and comprehend your sole foundation, the origin and history of the United States of America in one location. You don't need another book. Schools wouldn't need another book whatsoever. Right here. Why haven't they done this before? Yeah. So what does that also do? That book, this dash, President Donald John Trump being the face of this operation, exposes all of the corruption, all of your compromised people, all of the people who are in it for themselves, all those people, everybody. And if you are gay, if you are Buddhist, if you're something different than the foundation of this nation, you still should want someone like me and all of my counterparts fighting, because we'll fight for you. But what we're saying is you're not going to be funded anymore. You want to do something different to yourself, you do it. You do it. Now, we're not going to let anybody hurt you or harm you. All right? You're still going to have every freedom that you've always ever had, and then some. No one's taking your rights away. No rights have been taken away. You've actually been relieved. You've actually been freed. These gaslighters and manipulators for their own self-interest are the ones who have baited everybody against our core values in America. Our core values are what make us strong. Depending on how people are using them, though. There's are cases where you can use those against that. But still, all in all, if people will be reciprocal, if everybody would know what they're supposed to know, and then reciprocate it, and live that daily in your household, and go to work, and do those things. But if there's one person out there, and they say something to you, and you're like, don't. You don't have to receive anything. If someone tries to give you advice, and it's not someone that's your family or friend, depends on what it is. But if it's like negative, or spiteful, or hurtful, if it's not someone that you would seek advice from, don't let it affect you. Just move on. Even if they call you a name or something that you could actually be defined as racism or sexism, or even if it was, don't, just move on. Most of the time, 9.9 out of times, they just want to fight. They want to argue. They just want something that just, don't engage with it. That's the best thing you can do. Walk away. Now, when they're trying to steal something from you, a little different, right? When it's theft or a felony or something like that, okay, fight. That's what that's there for. And then I've had to do that. Had to call people out and bust people. But other than that, they calling me a name. They call me all names in the book. I consider that a rite of passage. Being called a name, knowing what I know. Because I'm the very person in the world that will protect people. Fight for you, fight with you, whatever it is, you know. But still not lose my principles. I don't lose my principles and my integrity just because of that. So there's a way to do this, and that's what everybody's been witnessing. But you can't just have it your way. And so many people have jumped ship with President Trump. Now, he's the face again. He's the face of the operation. He's not the whole operation, but he is the face. And because he is the face of that operation, jumping ship with the face of it means you're jumping ship on the whole operation. And when you do so, you're basically taking a giant you-know-what on every memorial grave in this land, and every veteran like myself who knows the laws and orders of what we're supposed to know. And there's a lot of veterans who do support me. And not just support me, but support, they know what's going on. There's a lot who don't have a name and a face because they don't want a name and a face. There are a lot of veterans that do know what's going on. They just don't want a name and a face. And that's okay, because they're doing what they're supposed to be doing where they are. Their family, in the military as we call it, their families and their friends are squared away. And their neighborhoods, predominantly, squared away. Their communities, squared away. Their neighborhoods and communities might not even know what kind of protection they have because of certain veterans out there that knows what's going on. And if it were, and it's not, but if it were to get a little awry, it wouldn't. But if it did, they're squared away. Square yourself away. Learn that terminology. Square yourself away. You're supposed to know everything that I know. So when you ask me how, people say, how are you so correct? I'm not correct because I'm correct. I'm correct because there's a formula and a blueprint in place. And everything I talk about has already happened. Whether it's on this day and it just released today, or it happened a week or two back, or whatever. Everything I talk about has already transpired via laws and orders that make up a strategic and special operation via irregular and unconventional warfare, and it's all validated. So President Trump using terms like occupied territory, white flag of surrender, capitulation, puppet government. President Trump uses them and the media uses them. The media are captured. They're under a wartime code. Title 47, Section 606, which is the Telecommunications Act of 1996. All right. They're under this code. It's called War Powers of the President. You've seen the AP poll, which is I always say the AP poll because that's what they judge the football scores by and football teams. But Associated Press, they've been banned from the White House in Mar-a-Lago. The only way that can happen is a wartime order. The 1798 Aliens Act. Well, who ruled President Trump could use that? Supreme Court. So that's happening. The View, you Republicans, The View, they need to be terminated. They're under investigation. FCC. All right. That's restricting telecommunications. That's an emergency power. All right. You have MSNBC that President Trump has hammered. He's hammered PBS and NPR. Guess when that started, though? That started in the fall of 2024. I thought, quote-unquote, Joe was the president. How did they start losing their funding back then? So see, if for the people that thinks he's real, then that means compliance. For the people who know what I know, you know what you know. It wasn't. It's an operation. So all these mainstream media, they are captured by a wartime order. And you got to know that. With the 1798 Aliens Act, that was just ruled upon not long ago. But the mainstream media had already been restricted long before then. Way back 2020. President Trump has an executive order for this. That is one of the executive orders of the national emergency that quote-unquote Joe continued. So there you go again, quote-unquote Joe, the Hoettes, and all of them talking about, oh, President Trump can't do this. He's a dictator, king, Nazi. So they continued the executive order with the national emergency that's restricting all of the mainstream media. So see, occupied territory, white flag and surrender, capitulation, puppet government. Guess what they're all found in? The Law of War Manual. That's not a federal government term. None of them are federal government terms. They're all Law of War Manual. So what's President Trump doing telling you, 94 percentile of civilians who don't even know your three branches of government, what's he doing telling you, speaking to you in military occupation, military operation, military government, military terms, when you don't even know your basic civilian terms, federal government terms? What's President Trump doing continuously quoting from those? In October last year, before the election, he said, we are an occupied territory. We'll soon no longer be an occupied territory. November the 5th is the Great Liberation. And then he said January 20th, the Great Restoration starts. He didn't say concludes. He didn't say finishes. He said it starts the restoration. Well, you might want to go check out the Law of Land Warfare from way back in the day. And you'll find in the same couple of pages, government in exile, puppet government, restoration. You might want to go check and read that out. Because in the Law of War Manual, puppet government and occupied territories, same chapter. Guess what that is? Military occupation. Restoration. Go check out what the word restoration actually means in the Law of Land of Warfare. So why is President Trump using all these military governing terms? Because he told you what? We've been invaded. We've been invaded. We've been invaded multiple times. Way back 2020. When all those key orders were put into place under your Section 1550 that is in the War Powers Act. We've been invaded. We've been invaded. We've been invaded. Then they told you 4 days before the executive order that federalized 1 million reserve components, they told you what? That the mainstream media told you that there was a general that was going to be installed just in case the law breaks down. Well, if the law breaks down, guess what that means? Martial law. If the law, constitutional law, is not there, then that means martial law, military. Well, guess who does this? Article 1, Section 9, Clause 2. You might go read that. It's called the suspension clause. Yeah, I guess that's why you've heard Mr. Miller mention what? The writ of habeas corpus. See, all these things go together. And there'd be no other reason in the world why President Donald John Trump will be standing up and telling the world military language, military verbiage, that majority of the people, if they already been listening or watching, going right over that head. Because they don't even know straight up regular government terms and how they conjoin, how they are enforced, and how they are applicable. So you want to know how I'm correct? Well, it's just because there's a time and a place for everything. And the good Lord put me here, as they did a lot of others that I work around and operate with. And there's got to be people who know what's going on, who have no bone in their body that can be compromised. That can take the hate, the ridicule, the mockery, the slander, the defamation, and everything, and still look that devil in the face and go, because the Bible tells you, no weapon formed against you shall prosper. Now, they use Bible verses too. They're not guilty in everything. They use Bible verses and all that. But the truth, it always comes out. So you'll know. That's why I try not to use as many. I try to give you everything as laws and orders again. Here's what you need to go see. Here they are. Go read them, study them, put them together. But you have to quote it too, because the truth always, it always does. It's going to unveil. If you live long enough, it's going to unveil itself in every scenario. So that's why you still quote Scripture, because God knows. God knows and He sees all. He knows who is and who ain't. He knows who's trying and who ain't. He knows who's manipulating and who ain't. He knows who's gaslighting and who ain't. He knows who's misleading and who isn't. He knows all that. He knows all because He's God. Right? So you still quote it, because you're going to find out who knew the whole time. You can already know that. You can already divorce your feelings and your emotions and unfollow all those pages that do nothing. Any page that's not showing you what this man's working with, they don't know. And guess what? The publication dates of all these, once people have read and studied the chronological order of what's in place, as this does, it shows all the chronological everything. Chronological meaning when it started and it's flowing, and I have part 3 that I'm currently writing because we're still in the operation and it's not done. The 47 is not done, so there will be a part 3 of this, meaning a continuation for history's sake, where people 100, 200, 300, 400 years, God willing, they don't ever go through this again. But if they did, they'd have a blueprint. They go, well, this is what they did way back then, just like we did with our founders. So this already shows you that these people that are using drama and propaganda, they don't know, didn't know, and won't ever know until they do know. But when they finally do know, guess what? They never knew. So if they never knew, and they got a blue check or a red check, and they telling you there's some kind of official or some kind of authority or whatever it is, if they never knew and they could have known, why would you want to follow them? Pretty simple, ain't it? It's that simple.